My name is Christina McClellan, and I'm a woman at Iowa.
The Chief Curator at the University of Iowa
Marin,
Museum of Art, and I'm a woman at Iowa.
Gigi Durham. I'm an Associate Professor in the School of Journalism, and I'm a woman at Iowa.
Hi, and welcome to Women at Iowa, a place where the University of Iowa community can come together and take pride in the accomplishments of the women who call it home. My guests today are former practitioners and faculty members of the former BA program in dental hygiene at the University of Iowa. Once the program closed, these women took on a lawsuit that challenged gender discrimination in regards to women-dominated professions. Please join me in welcoming Nancy Thompson and Beth Pelton. Ladies, thank you so much for coming onto our show today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Now, I understand that you, Beth, are from Iowa, and Nancy, you are from California. Mm-hmm. So how did you two come together to be at the same university?
You want to go first?
Thank you. I'm a native Iowan, and the reason I came to Iowa as far as being a faculty member is that I was recruited into graduate school, and as I finished graduate school, there were positions, actually 4 faculty positions in our department that were open, and I was asked to apply for that position, one of them.
Yeah.
And so that's how it is that I evolved to become a faculty member at Iowa.
And you were a student here too, weren't you?
I was a student. I was an undergrad and a graduate student at Iowa.
Great. And 4th generation, I think you mentioned?
I am a 4th generation female graduate of the University of Iowa on the maternal side of my family.
Great, it's incredible. And you, how did you come here from California, Nancy?
Well, I had gone to New York for graduate school, and then went to Chicago to work for the American Dental Association. And my job there was accrediting dental hygiene programs throughout the country. So I felt a jet-set job in Chicago was not for me and wanted to get back into academia, and knew that the University of Iowa was one of the premier programs in the country, and had come to appreciate the director at that time, Pauline Brine. Came here many Thanksgivings for Iowa apple pie and good things like that. So that's what brought me to Iowa.
Great. Now, you both are in the field of dental hygiene. What caught your interest in dental hygiene? Did you always know that you were going to be dental hygienists and then later teach in dental hygiene?
I was one who in 6th grade decided I wanted to be a dental hygienist. And I was very attracted to dental hygiene because I knew then, at that time, that dental hygiene is very health-based. It's not a disease-based profession like dentistry or medicine might be. And I wanted to help individuals prevent disease. I didn't know that term when I was in 6th grade, but that's really what I wanted to do. And so that was my major attraction to the profession.
Right. And for you, Nancy?
My path was a little less straight, but I felt dental hygiene was a career where you could be an idealist. You could really help people without having the burden of balancing whether you could earn an income from what you did as opposed to just helping. And so prevention and being a consumer advocate were what attracted me to dental hygiene.
And you've already kind of gone into this, but in terms of making that decision and knowing you wanted to go into dental hygiene, did you ever think that you might be interested in doing dentistry as well, or was it always pretty clear dental hygiene?
I think the only time that I think about that is if someone asks me that. I'm certain I processed it, but I also knew that dentistry is very disease-based. It's very treatment-oriented, very pathology-oriented, and that just was not my interest. For the same reason I wasn't interested in medicine.
Right. Yeah.
Same for me. I think I also, the procedures, I think dentistry is a science and an art, and to do it well, you need to be very creative with your hands as well as your techniques. It's not just formula techniques. And I didn't perceive myself as having those gifts.
Right. Now, when you both came to be on the faculty at the University of Iowa, what was the climate like in the College of Dentistry regarding dental hygiene in your program?
When I first began on the faculty, which was in 1974, it was a very healthy time economically, a very growth time, not only in this university, but in the professions of dental hygiene and dentistry. And so that was what we would call fun as compared to these days of economic crises.
Right.
As the years evolved, there began to be more perceived tension between dental hygiene and dentistry, nationally speaking, and we can probably get more into that as to how it evolved.
Right.
But at the beginning of my career, it was a very growth time, a very exciting time, but as the years passed, there were obvious differences in the way that we were treated.
Right.
What do you think?
And I think, I had worked for the American Dental Association prior to coming to the University of Iowa, and I was seeing a change there. I came in 1980, a change in the dental profession when, as caries became more bipolar in terms of its expression in the population, dentistry was kind of it was changing from a kind of medical counterpart for the mouth to a more entrepreneurial profession. And that lack of a lot of caries to treat kind of turned them inward and looking towards what we thought were the growth of a mid-level person. So there was potential for competition and head-on collision between dentistry rethinking what they could do and hygiene wanting to grow in what they thought they could do.
So things were kind of changing, so that the hygienists were there, your program was growing, and then dentistry was kind of rethinking the direction that they were going to take their programs at the same time.
Yes, at that time, dental hygiene as a profession was developing and growing, and was coined as a developing profession, reaching beyond what you might determine the occupational an occupation. And perhaps the difference between nursing and medicine and dental hygiene and dentistry is that nursing has its own independence in the way licensure is and accreditation of programs. And that's not true of dental hygiene. It's a very interesting profession in that it continues to be controlled by dentistry.
Right.
As dental hygiene was developing and growing and finding its own body of knowledge, its own research base, the profession became somewhat of a threat. Not somewhat, a threat.
Became a threat.
To dentistry.
Now, the program, when you guys were a part of it, how was it reflected in terms of gender? Were there many men who were involved in the program, or was it heavily female?
You can take it.
The faculty, students, and staff were all female. We attempted to recruit males, went to great lengths to identify them, find scholarships, make paths that would smooth it for them, but we were never able to actually integrate a male person.
It's interesting, though, to know that this field was having all this growth, and it's very prideful to know that this field was growing at that time because of women like yourselves. Now, when the program closed in the early 90s, were you expecting that at all?
During the 80s, we experienced progressive cutbacks in our program that were not parallel to other cutbacks.
Right.
We found ourselves more marginalized, losing faculty lines, staff, not getting resources to recruit dental hygiene students as was true of dental students who there were funds found to recruit dental students. So we found ourselves being cast aside for resources that we could see others were getting. So we knew that something was evolving.
Plus, they put a cap on our enrollment. So at one point, I think our maximum number of students was 52.
Wow.
In a class.
But in a class, but between 80 and 86, late 80s, the dictate came down that we could only admit so many. So we were compromised in size.
Now, what was your reaction when you found out that the University of Iowa, which is, am I correct, was the only BA program for dental hygiene?
It actually was a Bachelor of Science degree program,
Really?
and earlier in its days it was a BA, and then with its science base became a BS. So, yes, so.
And it also had a master's degree program.
An
So there were
MS.
2 programs in the department.
What did we lose in the closing of those types of programs?
Well, the ceiling for women, because it is a female-dominated profession, many more barriers for women, which during my career, I see that seems to be a fairly familiar theme, how female-dominated professions have a very difficult time in holding identity and that was a big thing that was lost, is the potential for, you remove a profession from a major research university, and then the profession doesn't have a way to grow. If there's no way to have a good research base and develop the body of knowledge, then the profession is very disadvantaged.
And we felt that the baccalaureate degree gave our students a career and the security that they could change with times, that they could be good citizens of their communities, that they had all the benefits of a baccalaureate degree that would enrich their lives and open doors for graduate education, besides giving them an immediate license and employment option.
And it sounds like an incredible program. So why did they close it? Why did they feel the need to just cut it out?
Well, we probably should tell you about one of the most innovative research projects that we had at the program. It was called the Expanded Function Program. And the department chair received a grant from the Kellogg Foundation, and the objective was to see, we felt we were growing mid-level providers who would know enough to know if their employer was providing good care, would be able to be judging on their abilities and growing as technology changed. But also this project was a research project with a very good design to see if dental hygiene students could be prepared to do more periodontal procedures, restorative procedures, administer anesthesia, and do treatment planning and diagnosis comparable to senior dental students. And the result of that very carefully designed study showed that they could. And so we felt that finding kind of put us on the map as a program throughout the country to show hygiene can grow, and may have made us more of a threat. The initial explanation of the dean was finances, economically hard times, and then it shifted a little bit that the wonders of strategic planning, which can be used to cover a multitude of sins, and that they said, well, there are some criteria in the strategic plan that your programs aren't meeting. Not enough students, which was the result of mandated smaller size, and grants and publications were less than other departments. And we didn't have the data to contradict that until after litigation, but it was not true.
And also small numbers of faculty. That was another thing, that the department was small because there were only 4 tenured track faculty in the department. However, in the College of Dentistry, department faculty numbers in departments are low.
Yeah. Now, you had mentioned, when we had talked earlier, Beth, the hygienist with a head. hygienists with heads.
Right.
Is that one of the key threats, do you think, that kind of caused, going along with the research citing that you mentioned, having these hygienists who were able to do, as you had mentioned, work as senior dental students?
Yes.
Was that also a threat?
Yes. When we think of many health professions, we do think of the technical aspect of a profession and what the procedures that are done, and that we certainly were educating dental hygienists to perform different procedures, but also be able to make good decisions, make good, careful, critical decisions.
Right.
And when a professional or an individual has the ability to make those decisions, then you do some cognitive processing, and that could be kind of frightening. So perhaps what might have been desired by some was the headless hygienist, the hygienist who has a pair of hands, who performs the procedures and just goes about it in a very rote manner.
Now, Nancy, right beforehand you had mentioned litigation, and I really want to touch on that because you both took the steps to say this isn't right, the closing of this program is wrong. Was that a hard decision to make, to choose to sue effectively the university?
Yes, it was. It's boat rocking. It's kind of academic kamikaze suicide, because a lot of your progress in your career relates to networking and rapport with others. So when you decide you're going to throw snowballs at the a major, very loved unit of the state, it's not going to an easy decision to make, and financially too, for the three of us to work with 3 lawyers over 8 years, 6 years of time. Considerable cost.
Costly in most realms of life, and emotionally and mentally, and certainly career-wise, very financially, very huge decision.
But you know, while this had happened to other baccalaureate programs throughout the nation, the fact that there were 3 of us, 3 tenured people who made this decision together was, and we kind of felt we were fighting for all the baccalaureate programs throughout the nation to tell, at least in this spot, that it wasn't right for dentistry to be killing and or thwarting development of its child, dental hygiene.
Now, what exactly were you challenging, and were you bringing as your case when you decided to sue? I believe, was it the dean first, and then the university is what?
We first, upon our attorney's advice, of course, it was made against the defendant's name were the dean of the College of Dentistry, College of Dentistry, and then the University of Iowa. And then we learned through the process that because the dean was an agent of the university, then the defendant would be the University of Iowa. So that's how that evolved. But our charges, our counts were, complaints were several. The primary one being sex discrimination. We were challenging Title IX, and challenging Title IX from an academic program perspective rather than what has largely been done with Title IX cases, which it pertains to sport, women in sport. And this was an academic program that was now being, we were challenging it. So it was sex discrimination, retaliation, and we had due process was one, and also the First Amendment, freedom of speech.
And how, I imagine that this was kind of a long process. How were the different outcomes of this entire trial?
It went to trial April of 1995. It was the federal system, so the court was in Des Moines, and we had 1,713 exhibits, so it was not light.
Yeah.
And that was basically a jury of our peers in Iowa, and they ruled that retaliation had been exhibited. So they awarded us quite a large sum for that, and the sum to cover attorney fees. Then in 1996, the university took it to the appellate court in St. Louis. So we went down there, and that, of course, was not a jury of our peers at all. And they reversed the decision. And then we asked the U.S. Supreme Court to consider it, and finally came down, we think about 1998, that they didn't feel it had national importance, so they would not be considering it. So it took us from 92 to 98 to run through the whole process.
That's incredible. It's a lot of time putting yourselves into that process. Now, in terms of retaliation, what did they find as in the first trial? That what types of retaliation were made against you three?
Further denial of resources. Once we spoke out, to the action that was taken, we were treated differently. Our salaries were. We did receive salary increases. The salary increases were less as compared to less as compared to our peers within the College of Dentistry. We had many examples of retaliation, and I think that was something that did convince the jury.
Our chairman was not a yes woman, so she did, when there was truth to power, she spoke it, and so for many years had she and our program, if we didn't play the game, had repercussions, and all that came out at the trial.
That's very interesting to me to see how the community is responding to this once you both, and then with your the chairwoman stood up against this. Now,
may I just say something about that? In view of the fact that we were all women,
right?
And in the College of Dentistry at that time, 90% of the faculty were males, and so the majority of the female faculty were in the department. Our department chair was the only female department head in the college, and you know, when you are different in genetically, generic or by gender, and you are, a person is very much in the minority, then one tends to notice what you do or say in perhaps a different way than if it was 50-50. So times that our department chair would speak out and defend and advocate for the faculty, the students, and the program, just as any department chair should do.
Right.
That person, or our department chair, was labeled as being, maybe perhaps difficult to work with. Well, isn't that what a department chair is supposed to do? And so that's to me a good example of looking at a person who may not be, who may be by gender a different, and putting different on labels, inappropriate labels on that person.
How did your students, dental hygiene students, how did it affect them? Were they able to continue graduating, the ones that you had matriculated into the dental hygiene program?
Yes, initially the dean wanted to kind of stop it immediately, but we advocated that not only those that were in the junior year, but those that had been accepted at the freshman year should be able to progress until they reached graduation, so that last class did not graduate till 1995. In terms of the reaction to it, you might be interested in, too, the fact that the Council on the Status of Women in 1991, when this was first brewing, organized a forum. The chair was Kathy Ringen, and Ellen Haywood was vice chair, chair-elect. And they had a forum where they were mentioning many of the female-dominated programs that were kind of on the chopping block in terms of strategic planning: dental hygiene, library science, social work, and geology, and allowed speakers from those areas to speak to the community at large. So we were very appreciative of the support they gave us at that time, and are happy that even though dental hygiene's neck was cut, so to speak, social work and library science and geology still exist.
We took great pride in our students, always. They, our programs, our department was known as one of the flagships of the nation. We prepared leaders for the profession, and our students who were in the system at the time of the closure and of the department and the phase-out were therefore being prepared to be leaders of the profession. And they took this very seriously, and sought to make appointments with the provost and at that time, I think the provost was known as the vice president for academic affairs. Really were developed, helped with newsletter or letter writing campaigns, and were just very big advocates for maintaining the baccalaureate degree. We remember at the forum that one of our students stood before this room that was just totally full. It was the second floor ballroom in the Union, standing room only. And our student stood at the mic and asked the Vice President of Academic Affairs, who was on the panel, why we couldn't get access to him. And he said, whatever he said, anyway, who remembers what he said? But the student said, we cannot get access to you. And that event forced him to say, I'll see you next week. And so the students did have time with the provost to make their stand. But as often an advocacy group will do, they developed some visuals, and we have a visual to show you that the students developed, which was criticized by, of course, who later became the defendants, as being something that again, this is how it would be viewed, that we as women, as feminists, were very militant. And the students designed this T-shirt. It says Operation Dental Hygiene 1991, and you can see the tank, the dental hygienist sitting in the tank with an explorer in her hand. And we have to keep in mind the context of the times, because this was the Desert Storm time. It wasn't that we were advocating, war.
Right.
But in the trial transcripts, it is known that, and in one of the committee reports, that we're being very militant. So the students designed this T-shirt, and they wore them very, very aggressively. And it was also the beginning of David Letterman's Top 10 Reasons time in 1991. So on the back, and these are all true, top 10 reasons to keep dental hygiene at the U of I. So there were 10 reasons that the students selected, put this on their T-shirt, and so this is
These are some great things too. And the first one is many career opportunities, which you both just said. You go and get a bachelor's, baccalaureate degree in dental hygiene, continue on to a master's degree, and you have, as you had mentioned, you're training leaders for the university.
And then it opens the door toward doctorate degrees. One thing I think that we want to make clear is that our programs, another part about the notoriety and the quality of the programs is we not only prepared the graduates at the baccalaureate level for clinical practice, but for community health, public health physicians. So that reaches even greater outreach to those who are underserved. Right. And in many community college settings, that it just isn't possible to educate a dental hygienist in that.
In terms of that public health outreach, the effects of closing the program then, in reality, do have other discriminatory effects far more than we see. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Right. I think we allocated one half of the senior year towards having students acquire basic public health background and experiences. And it was our feeling that if you wanted hygienists to be able to work in the schools, work in nursing homes, work in places where underserved are, you need a person who knows more than, has more than skills. And so we really felt that not many hygiene programs, even baccalaureate ones, allocated as much of their curriculum to developing public health hygienists. So we really felt that the citizens of Iowa, not only the dentists who employed hygienists in their private practices, but the clinics and other places that saw people who were kind of safety net healthcare providing places, were going to be disadvantaged by lack of hygiene students. It prepared in our program.
Right, the maternal and child health programs, the WIC programs in the state. Those
The
are
prisons.
The prisons, right, right.
Wow. Now, in terms of your friends and your colleagues, were there some people that it was difficult for them in the College of Dentistry to stand by your side while this whole process was going on?
I'd say our circle of friends got mighty small.
Yeah.
Mighty small. Although I do remember times that I would be walking from the dental school to the parking lot at night after a day of, in the clinic, and a colleague would stop and say, how are things going? And, I'm sure thinking about all of you, but I really can't stand up and support you. And so that was difficult.
Yeah.
In contrast, while some of the more status quo people couldn't, because they had kind of sold their soul in a way, or gotten so involved with the status quo that they couldn't distance themselves from it, people like the custodians and the janitors with heart would provide open support and write us little notes of support and not be worried about hiding where they stood at all. So that was very courageous on their part, but it just goes to show sometimes it's not the most powerful person or educated person who will stand by you in hard times.
Now, Nancy, you had mentioned that this was happening in other programs across the U.S. Did anybody else bring a lawsuit against their university?
No, and we felt that a unique advantage we had is that many of the other programs did not have more than one or two tenured faculty. We had 4, and 3 of us took the stand together. So while other programs were being cut, few other programs had the faculty positioned in a way that they could fight back. Don't you think that was what we found? I might say, too, that the master's degree program, there were only 6 in the nation, and ours was the only one that required students to do a thesis. So we were asking our students to try to answer dental hygiene's questions. Sometimes a master's degree program in a field like ours, you're just teaching basic research skills or answer dentistry's questions at less cost. But we were irritating again in that we wanted our master degree students to be answering questions that would build hygiene's body of knowledge.
So once the programs were closed at the University of Iowa, what did your grads in the baccalaureate program or grads in the master's program, what other, if they stayed in Iowa and stayed at the university, as well as with yourselves, where did you go? What other departments?
Do you want to begin with the graduates?
Sure.
The graduates certainly found positions because dental at that time, dental hygienists were very much needed, and so they found employment in clinical and public health settings, and with time, students, of course, who graduate from a liberal arts college pursue graduate study, and they pursued graduate study in many areas. That's the strength of a liberal arts degree.
Right.
One of our graduates became a board of regent. We have library scientists. We have people of faith,
people who
like
work.
what you would see for typical liberal arts graduates, in addition to the dental hygiene profession itself. And what did happen to us?
I think future students, though, had to go to, if they wanted a baccalaureate degree, they couldn't do it in Iowa. So they needed to go to Missouri or some other state.
Right, out of state. Out of state tuition, out of state, probably out of state, not coming back.
It's too bad. And then yourselves, what fields did you find for yourselves?
The three of us felt we needed to leave the College of Dentistry. And the department chair retired, and I moved into what was to become the College of Public Health, and Beth into the College of Liberal Arts. And so we're still here, but not in the College of Dentistry.
And one thing that I find very interesting is you had mentioned with the Council on the Status of Women and this forum that was held, there were a couple programs that almost seemed to be on this very similar chopping block. Are we seeing repeating patterns at the University of Iowa?
This is a very frightening time, because when budgetary times, hard budgetary times come, motives for closure can be concealed, and the foreclosure or elimination can be concealed. And I would call to all in this university setting to be very aware of that, that a budgetary crisis, we will have better budgetary times again, but this is a time for administrators to have an excuse to rid of something that they really don't want to have.
Why is it, do you think, that some of these programs are the programs that are pioneered by women and populated by women? Do you think that there's an easy answer to that?
You mean why they're cut, or why women go into?
Why it seems to be the programs that women are involved in? That's a difficult question, but...
Well, it's economic, probably. In our department, in dental hygiene, we've talked about this before, there was a way that each department could bring in income, and that was to be providing care. And dental hygiene wanted to have that privilege as well, but our faculty, when they did dental practice, brought in income primarily for other departments as opposed to the dental hygiene department. So that, so control of where you got money, dental hygiene still being licensed in the way it is, they are employed by dentists or have to have very close supervision. Right. So there's less flexibility in how they can earn money, and so that tends to be a problem for female occupations like hygiene.
Now, and getting to your point about other disciplines of study that are female-dominated, traditionally female-dominated, who knows?
Yeah.
But my opinion is that it is a very subtle form of continued discrimination in our society. When a profession, a discipline that is dominated by a gender doesn't get the opportunity to grow and develop, how can it entice the other gender to join up? And it is, I see it as a continual way to subtly discriminate against, in our case, against women.
And we were, in our prime, age-wise at that time.
Oh, age-wise, okay.
And the fact that discrimination laws, we didn't realize that how crude they are still at this point in history. Unless you're physically abused or clearly financially harmed, their ability to say that your ideas and your worth are being treated in a lesser way is very hard for the laws to do at this point in time. We brought our case all along the way to the dean, to the Adhoc Committee, the external review committee, the regents, and all along it seemed as if, and you know, some of us have PhDs just as the dental, but because it came out of a female's mouth, our arguments seemed to just kind of translate into feathers, whereas the same information coming out, the counterpoint information coming out of a male mouth was translated into something heavier than feathers. And the ability for society to even the playing field is still got a lot of work to do.
Do you think that these cases, or similar cases, will ever be brought eventually to some place like the Supreme Court? Do you think that soon they'll find it of national concern to address discrimination of very female-empowered professions?
I think this is where we'd need to have attorneys help us with this. As far as when precedent is set by the law, I think it would be quite some time before the judicial system might be looking at it again.
It would take either changing laws or reinterpreting laws to have a broader spectrum of discrimination. It's subtle, and I can sympathize with people of various ethnicities and races that say it's not gone, it's just subtle and harder to identify and rectify.
Subtle but very, very dramatic results and very dramatic effects.
We were talking about education of individuals and being able to function in society, and we know that in most societies the females are the group that moves the values and all forward in the society, and for females not to have the opportunity to have female-dominated professions grow, it just doesn't make sense.
Doesn't.
And another surprise we had in our full prime years was that, discrimination is not just a gender differentiation, it's a power. And so some women who become dentists or become
other types
in positions of power can be as discriminating as a male. So it's deeper than just the gender of the person in power.
Now, we had one other item that I wanted to show, and if we get it explained, it takes us back to the trial, but I understand you guys had another kind of private joke among the trial. Do you want to explain that?
This was not created by the students. This was created by one of our attorneys and her staff, I think. One of the mock review committees was an ad hoc committee that was essentially added on after we said there's no due process here, that according to the university strategic plan and all that we had no due process. And so very fast during the fall of '91, an ad hoc committee was formulated to review the decision, and the ad hoc committee, of course, agreed with what the dean's recommendation was, and so that became a point in the trial. So one of the defendant attorneys, even though Midwestern, seemed to take on somewhat of an Eastern accent, ambiance, and so would ask the question about this ad hoc committee, but he would always describe it as the Odd Hoc Committee, and it just got to us. So our attorney produced this, and this is our case number for those who'd like to get access to it. So,
and we should say that the Women's Archive we were very grateful to be able to organize feet-long files of both our dental hygiene program and the litigation process, hopefully to help other people avoid the situation we were in.
Now, after this entire struggle, the court case, the closing of your program, friends changing, connections changing. Do you have any advice to women who may feel that they're in similar positions, their programs are being cut, or they're not able to feel like their professions are respected? What would you say to those women?
Well, if you have a nest egg, it's probably going to be gone. That's what we learned, because in the end, we paid for it all, in a financial way as well as others. So, you know, I'd say continue networking with one another, develop strong liaison ties. I frankly, at this time, don't see that at the intensity on our campus as I did in the early 90s, the late 80s,
Right.
when women were more visibly bonded together. What else would you say, Nancy?
Well, you know, we were basically not wanting just to say we're good because we're women, we're good because we're educated. So we put a lot of trust in not just cheerleading yourself into a frenzy of love me, I'm female, but love me, I have worth.
Yeah.
And so get education, get experience. I do, you know, the three of us, I can't emphasize that enough. There were 3 people to be standing together on this, and I don't think it can be done on your own. Look at history, build on precedents.
Be very committed to it in terms of time and priority, because it does take constant commitment and time.
One of the reasons we had 1,700 and some odd exhibits is because we were very good at writing down all the activities that had happened to us over time, taking notes, what happened, what date. It's important to have documentations.
Right.
You can't remember it 10 years later.
Particularly with something that you had mentioned, Nancy, isn't just when it's hard to see some of those, when they argue they can't see a physical effect, like money being taken away or physical violence, having that, what you document as your physical evidence for that type of discrimination.
Absolutely.
Now, there's one question that we like to ask our guests at the end of interviews to kind of leave to our women at Iowa, is we like to ask you to recommend a book or a paper, something that influenced you, that you can have our guests read to kind of understand a little bit about where you're coming from in your life story.
Campus Troublemakers. It's about faculty who had problems in the academic arena because, as Beth said, Title 19, the sports people in academia, but non-sports people, and so that book kind of covers and gives sympathy for that aspect. That's, I think, the title of it.
Good.
Campus Troublemakers.
And one that I'm remembering now is, the title is, and I'm sorry I don't remember the author, Lifting a Ton of Feathers. And it relates to academia and the challenges that females face.
Well, thank you again so much for coming on the show today. And thank you all for tuning in to Women at Iowa.